Welcome to my teachings on friends this morning. It's May 13th, 2020, and we are gathered here in our village to engage in some wisdom together, engage in some teachings together. I will tie this talk into the talks that I've been giving over the last few weeks and talk about the importance and the nature of friendship and relationships in general. We'll talk a little bit about how things go funky in relationships, and how we can get back into alignment through our practices. At the end, I will introduce the teaching. Some of you have worked with me before on this, of Sutra 133 of the Yoga Sutras, which is actually a very practical and short and succinct teaching about how to sort of fluidly move in between different kinds of roles as a friend, and how to respond to different types of experience that arise for us as humans. We have one more week after this of diving deeper into this. So whatever we don't go deep enough into today, or you have questions about, I hope you reach out and so that you know that we can. I'm excited about this format where we can kind of go into something and then everyone can sit with it for a little bit. We can go back in, and in the interim, I do invite anyone to ask questions, to have conversations about this, and it very much influences what I teach and what I talk about in here, the conversations we're having in the interim. So please be a part of that. So the coordinates is this 9-part inquiry series. I actually have a teacher who sent out, a shamanic teacher who sent out a thing about the nine vital universal questions a couple of weeks ago, and I thought, wow, I haven't actually looked into what his thing is. You have to pay to do it, and I wasn't able to go to the thing anyway. But I'm going to look. But I'm curious to see if they're really similar. I discovered these as being these really important pillars of sort of inquiry that can kind of hold up the house of our practice and our lives. But there are lots of templates. There's lots of models. It's not the only one. But I keep testing it, and it keeps working. And in this inquiry journey, the very first thing that we look at are different types of relationships that we have. And we discover that really life is relationship. Many of you have heard me use the term right relationship, which is a term that my shamanic teachers use. One in particular uses that term a lot, and it really hooked for me, the sense that what we're doing on this path is learning how to be in right relationship. And that's, for me, was a very different perspective, because in this more individualistic kind of egoic perspective, I was framing everything sort of in this almost competitive way, or this way where I'm moving through the world, and it's sort of me versus the world. Or if I do have a friend along with me, it's maybe us versus the world. But there's this sense of contra, of against, and of friction, and that battle doesn't ever ease up. I think I thought, like, well, if once I win the battle, everything will be great. But what happens instead, of course, there are certain kinds of worldviews or beliefs where if you keep going with them, they will inevitably take you somewhere. And what I've realized is that any belief that's promoting war will only take us to more war. And so rather than trying to sort of dominate the world, or trying to be the best, right, over top of others, this concept of right relationship is the concept of, where do I fit? where do I fit best so that this bigger thing called life can kind of use me, and that I can be a part of it and be in relation and be in relationship. And of course, this concept of right relationship means the right relationship that I have with a bear is a different right relationship than I have with a human baby who's in my care. I am The right relationship acknowledges that I'm looking to the other and acknowledging that they have their role. Everybody in this whole big thing has their own part to play. And if I want to do a good job at playing my part, I have to do a good job at paying attention to who's around me and what their jobs are and what their energies are. That's a bear, right? The kindest thing I could do for me and the bear is to not confront the bear, right? That's a baby, the best way to be with a baby is this way. And obviously it's always a work in progress and it's always a learning, but what does it require? It requires awareness. It requires a great depth of awareness of self and of other and of this bigger thing that we're creating together and collaborating on. And so just at the top of this talk, I will talk a little bit about these really important relationships, different types of relationships that we've been exploring in the beginning of the coordinates journey. And then tie that in to the work that we're doing with friends and how we can be in right relationship with our friends and with everybody. So the first thing that we talked about was sources, and in a sense, every single coordinate is a source. And what I mean is a source, a resource, somewhere we can go to get energy, nourishment, wisdom, love, healing, all the things that we need, all the things that we go out seeking in life. That a source, what I mean when I say source is simply that it's anything that's going to provide that, provide what it is that we need. And so sources themselves, that exercise is really about you guys exploring where you go when you need, and exploring what are sources that are effective, where we can we can get our needs met and the exchange is fair. And I'm going to talk now about nitya and anitya sources, meaning eternal sources, these sources that are going to be like the most trustworthy sources we can find. And then the sources that are just by their nature, if we're in the right relationship with them, if we're honest about it, are not eternal, and they're not going to be able to provide as much of that trustworthiness as the eternal sources are. But what I mean by all the coordinates or sources is, of course, with every single, the questions wouldn't be in the coordinates. It wouldn't be one of our questions that we look at if by looking at it, we didn't discover something that we can take with us. Every single thing in the coordinates is something that is going to give us something. Later we'll be looking at our fears, we'll be looking at our vision and our mission and our truth. And just even saying those different words, right? There's for me, like, I got something out of that. We get something out of understanding what our vision for the future is, clarity and confidence. So this is what I mean by just doing the work with these. It's all source. We get a source from all of it. And so this is the first thing that we've been contemplating. And if you're just jumping in, don't worry. Like, this thing, we go back, you just go circle through these things. There's no wrong order to do it. But, my source, my ultimate source, as I shared quotes with you about, my ultimate source is the Tao, or sometimes called the supreme, the all, the one, the universe. And this is my source, not because I just personally like the universe. Like my favorite color is vanilla. It's because it just seems right. It seems like this is where we all come from. I shared a lot of quotes from my favorite teachers about this a couple of weeks ago, but the one deserves my offering, right? In the Tao Te Ching, they say, all beings spontaneously honor the Tao. We're all doing it already. Every little thing in this universe that I go around seeking as a source, every single thing is the universe. I am the universe. And so we're already in this relationship. We can't get out, And so bringing ourselves back into right relationship with a relationship that just has always been and always will be, that can't hurt. So the one, the all, the Tao is vast. It's complex. It is massive beyond my own cognition. It's tiny beyond my own imagining. It's so diverse and complicated, and it's such a beautiful interconnected web. The design of it is such, and I'm not its designer, the design of it is such that I can't actually fully comprehend what the universe is. When I comprehend, there may be an ability to touch it. This is what all the gurus say, to experience it, because we're already having that experience actually. But I can't understand it. The human hookup that the universe gave me, that source, that Tao, that the Supreme gave me, is limited. And so I can only relate through this vehicle of the mind so many ways before I run into walls. I get stuck. I just can't quite grasp the bigness of the universe. And so, as in the Tao Te Ching, it says it starts with the one and then we get the two. So what do we do? What does the human mind and human hookup do? Well, this is what I've done. I have split it into two. I've spent most of my life splitting it into two and seeing it as two. And of course, I'm not the only one who split the one into two. Yin and yang is a symbol of one and two. I have that poster, that yoga poster back there that has the two side channels snaking up. This is the yoga anatomy, where they say we have two sides, and ha and ta, sun and moon, yin and yang, masculine and feminine, all these themes, right? And that is the balancing and the reharmonizing of the two sides. That is hatha yoga. That is the physical, the physical practices of yoga. So this theme shows up in all of the ancient healing traditions. It shows up in all of the Enlightenment philosophy too, that we work with these pairs. And that once we realize that the pairs that seem like they're opposites, right? Black and white, suffering and joy, that's something we're going to talk about, but in particular, success and failure. That these things that we think of as opposites, things that I was talking about last week, go to war when we think that they're opposites. Once we see that they're one, the way that the yin and the yang and the symbol are one, enclosing each other, encasing each other inside and around, and always in right relationship with each other, that once we come to see that, the war ends. Wholeness prevails again. So I encourage you also to just be aware of pairs. and they are like the front and the back of the hand. They belong together, and I can express to you, like you can cognitively understand that this is the front of my, my hand, the back of my hand, but actually neither one has a purpose on its own. I wouldn't be able to do a lot with just one. Do you know what I mean? They go together. And though the human mind can split them apart, and even you could even imagine they were at war. In the essence of the thing, that's not true at all. In the essence of the thing, they are one, they are whole. I, as I said last week, have claimed this pair. And actually, this is a discovery that I made through the first time that I did my coordinates a few years ago, this pair that's really powerful for me. I do definitely work a lot with talking about masculine and feminine and all that, but this pair of, for me, truth and love feels really resonant. And so I've been working with those and calling them my parents, my original parents. Okay, my Nitya sources. Nitya in Sanskrit means eternal. Our sources should bring about a sense of trust. And trust comes when we can really rely on something. And you can rely on the universe, right? It's here. Truth, love, it's here. And as far as I can tell, it's, everything that is good in the world is an expression of these two. And yes, everything that's good in the world is an expression of the Tao, but like I said, sometimes that feels too big for me. Sometimes I need to get a little smaller to work. And, because we have a human mind, we need a place to begin. And so these two poles can really help with that. We tend to split things into subject, object. We tend to need a starting line and a finish line for our journeys, or at least an imagined one, before we can feel confident to step forward. And so this is how we use these. This is kind of how systems get created that try to explain reality. Every single one is not yet reality, because once we explain it, we're out of the hole. We're splitting things up, but that's okay, right? That's okay. Figuring out what my nitya sources are has been really helpful, because of course there's anitya sources, meaning there are my sources in this world, which are human, which are mortal. Every single human life has an expiration date, unlike the Tao and unlike love and truth and spirit. The mortal body and the heart and the brain, they all have an expiration. That's how it works. And along the way, we're all on a journey. It turns out we're all on this learning journey together. And none of us is complete. They say, the enlightened being, sure, you can trust the most, because basically they're as close to love and truth as they can be. They've gotten over the story of war. So they know that harming you is harming themselves. So you can trust the enlightened being, they say. You can trust the one who's gone on the journey. But for most of us, including myself, I'm still on that journey. We're still on that journey. And so what we're going to find is, along the way, our anitya sources do disappoint us sometimes. Not always there. Not always perfect in that way. But what I think is really cool is, and this is now, this is how I work now. If I'm looking for somebody that I'm going to study with, or I'm going to spend time with, I want to see that they also have their values that they're honoring. And if those values feel similar to my values of love and truth, it's going to come through in the way that they are. And this is really helpful for me. It's given me a great sense of self-trust, because I feel like I've actually got a way to assess. And this is what truth and love have become for me: masculine, feminine. These poles sort of become like a measuring rod, where we can say, where am I in alignment or out of alignment with love and truth? If I'm having a hard time getting into right relationship with someone, how can I get both of us back to love and truth, so that this bigger Nitya source becomes the context for our relationship? Otherwise, I find that when there's conflict, we end up kind of scattering to the two ends of the pole and facing off. And each one of us wants to win. But we can't win, because the annihilation of the pole, if the yang annihilates yin, it annihilates itself. The same way that if the front of my hand annihilates the back of my hand, no hand, this isn't going to work. Right? So scions is our second coordinate. And scions also are a source. I told the story last week about how, for me, actually discovering scions was discovering my own purpose and my own value. And that means they're a huge source for me. You're my scions, right? You're a huge source for me. Thinking about preparing, all of this effort, like, this is what I do. This is especially in quarantine, and I'm alone here, and it's like, that gives me this raison d'etre, which is so, so important. And the way that when I show up for scions, and when I try to seek sources, what it's about for me is there love and truth flowing? And this is really helpful, because now we're going into the teaching on friends. The teaching on friends has to do with of course, this what we're talking about with right relationship. And what I've discovered is that truth and love, and let's throw this in here, trust, right? Trust is such a huge theme for all of this, right? If I'm going to be a good source for others, for my scions, it's going to be because truth and love are present, because you can trust me. And from that trust comes a confidence in your own practices and in the teachings. And it means that you're going to be able to go all in, and when I'm making an offering to scions, or to friends, or to sources, right? Because we're also all making offerings in all these relationships. If I'm making an offering that doesn't have truth and love flowing through it, then I know that I'm an ego. And we're going to talk a lot more about ego in our fear section soon. But because the idea is that fear always comes with ego. And ego is this identity that's polar. It's an identity that's separate. It's an identity that doesn't account for its interconnectedness. So it's a kind of false identity that's hardened, and that keeps us from being inside of life. And I've talked about codependency, but I think this is just it's such an important point, that codependency happens when we go to a friend or a scion or a source, and we're trying to get, like I said, like, we get things out of our relationships, right? That's how it is. Like, we're supposed to. supposed to be getting oxygen out every time I breathe in. That's a great relationship. I'm supposed to be giving the trees, my exhale. But when there's fear, okay, and fear is what I put against trust, right? Fear is not bad in and of itself. It's got its place as well. But when there's too much fear and we're in ego and we get in that protective stance, we go into one of two poles that go together, right? But when we're afraid, we tend to want to take those resources, right? Like grasp them, hoard them, cling to them. That's called unhealthy attachment. And when we feel that someone's coming for them, we're defending them. And so in every exchange, in every friendship, in every relationship, I'm actually really trying to make sure that any offerings I give, I also give in a way that infuses that other being with self-confidence, with self-trust, with a sense of their own value and worth. And that's tricky because often when we go and we try to fix something for someone else, we try to give them everything that we have. We are with one hand giving to them and with another hand taking away. So there's so much more that I want to say here, but what that equals is relationship without freedom. It creates bonds that are tinged with fear, and what it does is it creates it reestablishes these self identities that are separate. So, like in my last relationship, it's a good example. Yin and Yang. We fell into these very traditional, really masculine, feminine roles. I was doing all the emotional labor, and he was making a lot more money and taking care of all the material aspects, really, for both of us. And what ended up happening is that rather than it being a symbiosis that was freely given, we both almost like used our offerings to kind of trap the other one in a way. And we both increasingly over the years lost our own capacity to do those jobs for ourselves. So that we ended up at these two different poles facing off to each other at war. The feminine is right, the masculine is right. Neither of us were right. And just wanting to be right destroyed the sense of collaboration. Okay, so here's this teaching. There's just so much here. I'm going to chant this teaching for you from the Yoga Sutras, and I'll give you guys all of those. But here it is. I don't even know. I don't think it's backwards for you guys. Maitri Karuna Mudita Upekshanam Sukha Dukkha Punya Punya Pashayanam Bhavantaha Chitta Prasadanam. We're going to go into this deeper next week because this always happens. I ran out of time. But I'll just very quickly in the last 2 minutes of this talk, just tell you what the heck's going on here. This is a teaching from the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali where he talks about how to respond as a friend to all of life. And here's what this teaching says. He says that we can clarify the chitta, the field of consciousness. This is the goal of meditation in yoga. Yeah. When we realize, when we experience happiness with friendliness, when we experience, when we feel, here's a better way of explaining it. When I experience, okay, so the Vishayanam is an experience. When I experience sukha, which means happiness or ease or joy, when I experience sukha, I want to meet it with maitri. And maitri means friendliness. Maitri means an attitude of care, an attitude of welcoming, an attitude of acceptance, the way that we are with our dear friends. Dukkha, right? So sukha, dukkha, punya, apunya. These are like 4 different things you can meet in life. Okay, sukha is ease or joy. Dukkha is pain or suffering. Punya is virtue, or like when somebody does something really good, and you're like, yeah. You know. Punya and apunya means non-virtue. We already learned nitya and anitya, eternal and non-eternal. So punya and apunya, virtuous and non-virtuous. These are these things we meet in life. And what he says is, if you want to stay undisturbed, if you want to come into right relationship with everything, you can kind of break it down into 4 experiences and then 4 responses. And each one matches, right? So right relationship. If you mismatch it, right? If you treat the baby like the bear and the bear like the baby, we have problems. It's about matching them, right? So friendliness for joy, compassion for pain and suffering. When we see virtue, mudita, and mudita means joyfulness, celebration. Mudita is a mood of celebration. And apunya, we meet with upeksha, which means we meet it with equanimity. And so what are all of these responses? These are the responses when we are in a state of love and truth and trust. These are the responses we can have. And these are the responses we'll just naturally have, actually. They're naturally arising. Otherwise, when I see somebody else's joy, often I wonder, I don't trust. I go into fear. I go into separateness. I go into polarity that the other has, and that means I have not. When I see somebody else's pain, often what do I want to do often is either ignore it, go away. I don't know. It's like it's contagious, right? Or I want to fix it. But both of those are from my own feelings, right? Compassion means I'm going to be present and available, and I'm going to be with the suffering. That's what compassion means. Actually, the word itself means with emotion. And when we see the successes of others, often we can do that same polarity thing. Well, they're successful, that means I'm not. So how do we, but when I'm not in fear and I see my friend have a success, I go, yes. And finally, when we see somebody doing something that's not great, right? There's a lot of that going on right now, and a lot of people are really angry at how everyone is responding to COVID-19 and quarantine, and there's just so much judgment of each other, and as we're all trying to figure this out. And upeksha means I'm not actually going to condone whatever you're doing. Like something inside me tells me it's maybe not in alignment with truth and love and trust. You might not be in right relationship right now, but I'm still going to be able to sit here and say that's because you're on a journey. So you're anitya. You're still not immortal. You still have a ways to go. And so I'll still be here. And so this teaching, which we'll go into more next week, and I'll post it for you guys so you can dig into it in the meanwhile. This teaching is helping us learn how to respond to the Vishayanam around us, the outer world. But here's the last little teaching for today. This sutra comes in a section that is about meditation. It comes right at the beginning of a section that teaches us all kind of different ways of meditating. It is foremost, the way that we can be a good friend to others is foremost by being a good friend to ourselves. And so this is your assignment for this week, is to try to practice these inwardly and outwardly, practice them in all directions. But what we find is the way that we relate inwardly and the way that we relate outwardly is the same. And so as long as we can't be a good friend to ourselves, we can't be a great friend to others. All right. Thank you so much. I'm going to read Pam's question and respond. And if you have to go, I understand. In this world where we can disappear, where someone becomes unavailable, but we don't know why. Are they suffering? Are they just onto other things and don't respond to us? Then what is the right relationship? I find this is really hard. I find myself in fear that I will step in where I don't belong, or I'm in fear that I'm not showing up for them. Oh, great question. Such a great question. And one that, of course, all the great meditation manuals in the world can't totally answer for us. I think that there are just times where it's challenging and where we're going to have to, where we're not going to be able to find easy answers, in that kind of situation, I think that, again, that all the principles that we use for our meditation practice apply here, because when we meditate, we're being a good friend to ourselves. And, the first thing I think is to show up, just to keep showing up. And I think that, and then feeling for ourselves what is your intention. Like, get in touch with your sources. That fear, I get, you're like in a trap, right, where you're like, if I step in and they really don't want me there, then I'm, like I was kind of saying before, like taking away something from them. I'm not giving them their freedom, their autonomy, their space, their boundaries, their right to choose. And those things are really important to give somebody. And on the other hand, if I'm not showing up, what if they kind of fall into a crack and then I later regret it, right? Because I could have been there for them. These are exactly the kinds of situations that come up when we realize we are motivated by love. We are moving around this world because of care, everything we do. So when I have situations like that, I really do try to do my practices, my inner practices, on behalf of this person first. And so that's how I show up first, especially if you guys are already kind of embattled somehow, and you probably don't even, when we're in that, we can't really see it. It's really hard to see the whole when we're so resolutely in one pole. And maybe they're having that experience and they can't really see you for what you're trying to provide. But you can kind of work with that inwardly and start to cultivate that the energy or the bhav or the mood that you would like to give them, even if you can't in your actual interactions right now. And then just start to cultivate that for yourself. Keep showing up for them by showing up for you. And one of the most important things that friends do for us is they're models for us, they're mirrors for us. And you see a friend doing something over and over again until you go, that's good, but I'm going to take that, right? But that usually works better than us. Then to model it usually actually is way more effective, even if it takes a little more patience, than to try to push something on someone. Because again, that's that thing where we're giving somebody one thing, but we're actually taking something away from them with the other hand. All right. I hope that was helpful, Pam. We can keep this conversation going on the in Nowhere Village. I'll post this video and we can keep talking. I'll post the quotes and some extra quotes I didn't get to today, but we'll get to next week. All right. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you, my friends.